TV Crazy Man here. In this video, we go back in time to 1977 to look for goof special effects and fun facts surrounding the TV superhero The Man from Atlantis. A man who can breathe underwater, has superhuman strength, and can talk to animals, even land animals like horses. Let's see Aquaman do that. Along the way, we'll also run into some very interesting guest stars like Ted Cassidy and Karate Kid's Pat Morita, plus some of the really strange creatures and humanoids that showed up on the series. Did they just try to steal Spock's hand gesture?
Then it is time for me to get a ball I can stand on.
I think he means we should get on the ball and get going.
It means to begin to act.
Patrick Duffy played the man from Atlantis, a man who has no idea who he really is. He gets named Mark Harris and ends up working for a secret group called the Foundation for Oceanic Research.
We don't know what you'll run into.
The sea is my home.
Duffy was really the biggest asset the show had, both for his acting and for creating the scenes that convinced us a man could breathe underwater.
Your meltdown is over, Mr. Schubert.
During speaking underwater scenes, Duffy would inhale water to avoid leaving air bubbles. Duffy once said in an interview that he went from being able to stay underwater for 1.5 minutes to 2.5 minutes without air. The submarine Mark and the crew rode in was actually a miniature created by the special effects team of Gene Warren Sr., who had won an Academy Award for work on the 1960 movie The Time Machine. But while many scenes were impressive, not all special effects were top-notch as the series progressed. Like the giant jellyfish monster from the episode Man of War, which was plainly a really neat giant balloon. And I really don't know what the guy's screaming about. I mean, Mark Harris clearly has the ability to speak to giant balloons. Victor Buono, I don't know how to say that. The reoccurring villain, Mr. Schubert, gets attacked by one of the jellyfish's arms, but I'm not sure who has a hold of who here. And I do see a string on the end of the arm. Yes, probably wouldn't be visible on old TV sets, but it's interesting as it clues us in on how the arm was made to move. Now, Victor is one of those fun actors I always like to see pop up, as I know him best as the villain King Tut from the 1966 Batman TV show. That being said, I think they may have used him a little too much.
Nobody's listening to you from here on in, fat man!
I mean, it's good to have a wide variety of threats for a superhero and not the same bad guy too often.
You're an amateur.
Now hang on, next I'm going to tell you which episode I thought was the best, and which episode I thought was probably the worst. Lots of goofs, of course. And the weirdest episode of anything I've ever watched in my life, and yet still enjoyed up to a point, was Crystal Waters' sudden death. It was really bad, but who knows, maybe they meant for it to be bad. Mark discovers a force field of some kind under the ocean, and on the other side is dry land, which is interesting, I have to say. So it kind of reminds you a little bit of Journey to the Center of the Earth, at least in that respect. Well, Mark runs into these alien-looking mime guys who all have the same fashion sense. I mean, they wear white all day, every day. And to be honest, they sound a little like clucking chickens. And they walk like them too. Of course, strangely enough, they remind me a little of John Travolta back in the day. I really like that song, Staying Alive. And I don't know, something about this scene reminds me of the Three Stooges. Another thing I thought they did was actually kind of interesting was to adapt either Mork's Nanu hand gesture or was it Spock's? The two were about the same, I guess. Some of these hand gestures are just not exactly alike. On a trivia note, this episode had that actor from Star Trek Deep Space Nine who played Constable Odo. Sorry, but I admit defeat. I couldn't possibly say his name.
Oh, come on, you're no fun.
The best episode to me was Shootout at Land's End, where Mark finds a spot in the ocean that leads to the Old West, where someone is already there that appears to be his twin brother, Billy. Now, Mark shares the man's pains when they get close enough. Now, the bad guy turns out to be Pernell Roberts, best known as Adam Cartwright from Bonanza. I did find at least one little goof on this episode. There goes Mark's hat. And his hat's back on. I don't guess he stopped the horse to grab his hat and then get back on again. And then he loses his hat again. I wonder if one of his superpowers is the ability to grab a hat while it's on the ground without touching it. They did another time travel episode where Mark ends up saving Romeo and Juliet, which is a fine episode. But I'm not as crazy about that time period as the Old West. It guest starred John Shea, who would go on to play Lex Luthor on the 90s Superman TV series Lois and Clark. So when they asked Patrick Duffy to throw the statue onto the ground, smashing it into bits, they hadn't considered the possibility that he might accidentally hit the camera as well. Well, everything worked out alright. At least they didn't break the camera. The episode Scavenger Hunt is interesting for a couple of guest stars and this weird creature that looks like a forerunner to something that would later appear on the Power Rangers. Or somebody stole one of those early 1960s monster costumes from one of the Godzilla movies from Japan.
You are what Elizabeth would call a fraud.
This episode guest starred the mighty Ted Cassidy, who seemed to have his footprint on almost every superhero show of the 70s.
How do you know that name?
In the 60s, he shot to fame as Lurch the Butler from the Addams Family. But in the 70s, he was usually the intimidating giant. He even played Goliath once versus David. The Bionic Bigfoot, he even did the voice of the Hulk and the show's intro narration. In this episode from Man from Atlantis, he played a native who led his people to basically worship the weird two-headed sea creature. Ted Neely guest starred as a good-natured con artist named Jack Muldoon. Neely is famous for the controversial movie and play Jesus Christ Superstar. According to an article I read, Neely is a Christian, but Christians have had mixed responses to the film, some considering it to be disrespectful to God, especially when it first came out back in 1973. I'm pretty sure my parents didn't like it back in the day, so I actually have never seen it. Now, this was actually the second episode that Neely played Muldoon. The first was the episode Giant that featured Kareem Abdul-Jabarr. Well, of course you remember him. Giant basketball player, took on Bruce Lee, did the Airplane movie. There's a lot of giants in here. It was kind of a weird episode where Mark goes through one of those portals that seems to be everywhere, and he ends up in a place where Kareem's character is somehow siphoning off the world's oceans. The episode Imp has a couple of classic TV and movie stars. Pat Morita from Happy Days and The Karate Kid plays a magical childlike imp that turns the minds of adults like Duke, played by Dick Gautier, into children and causes a lot of trouble by doing so. Now, Dick Gautier, I hope I'm saying that right,
Missed it by that much.
played the robot Jaime on Get Smart. The doctor responsible for saving Mark's life on the pilot episode was Dr. Elizabeth Merrill, played by Belinda Montgomery. She went on to appear in memorable roles such as Sonny Crockett's ex-wife on Miami Vice and as the mother of Doogie Howser. She must not have been too happy with the way the series was headed because she apparently sued to get out of her contract and missed out on the last 2 episodes. Alan Fudge played the administrator for the Foundation for Oceanic Research. In the episode C.W. Hyde, he gets the spotlight as his character turns into a Mr. Hyde personality type. Of course, you probably already know what happened to Patrick Duffy after the Man from Atlantis went off the air. Actually, before the last episode even aired, he was already working on Dallas as Bobby Ewing. After that, he went on to star in a series Step by Step, which was a fun comedy family sitcom.
You want me to put it back in? We can play it again. Oh, come on, you're no fun.
Patrick Duffy must still have a soft spot for his role as Mark Harris because in 2016 he released a book he wrote on the show that I believe is just a continuation of Mark's story. Marvel Comics had a series for Man from Atlantis for 7 issues, but just as the TV series was canceled, so too was the comic book series. I looked it up, and except for a few episodes, most of the later episodes from Man from Atlantis ran up against Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley, at a time when almost every kid in America wanted to watch the Fonz. And even though I was a big Happy Days fan, I'm pretty sure I was watching Man from Atlantis, because it seems like Happy Days may have already been in syndication at that time, and it was on every day anyway for a big chunk of my childhood, so there was no reason to miss a TV superhero.
You double dare me?
Double dare. Okay, well, you watch this. Okay.
But likely that's probably why Man from Atlantis was canceled. They put it up against the most popular couple of shows on television at the time. Please hit the like, share this video with friends, and comment. Talk about your memories of this classic TV series. Do you think this show could have made a go of it if they hadn't went up against Happy Days? Were you upset that we never got to fully investigate Mark's origins? I wonder if Patrick Duffy might consider a TV movie to explain Mark's origins. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you all have a great day.
Is not get on the same as stand on in English vernacular?